Welcome to Zoom In, Zoom Out. I'm your host, Alec MacDonald. A Chinese naval blockade of Taiwan would constitute a threat to Japan. That was a comment made by Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi Sanae. China responded resoundingly by banning imports, issuing travel warnings, and starting a widespread information campaign against Taiwan, Japan, and Prime Minister Takaichi. But just how do these information campaigns reach audiences globally? And are they actually effective? To find out more, I talked to experts who study China's information operations overseas and how they impact audiences. Athena Tong from Tokyo University, Daisuke Furuta from Japan's Fact Check Center, and Wei-Ping Li from FactLink.
So for the Chinese government, lawfare in itself, particularly political warfare, is never just a standalone thing. It's the three warfares kind of strategy where you have the informational side, of course, but you also have the psychological side as well as the legal warfare side of things, which you just mentioned. So with legal warfare, it tends to go not only via domestic courts, it tends to also extend towards international courts or multilateral platforms like the UN. So in the case where the PRC is targeting Japan, a lot of it is happening on the level of the UN, where, for example, it criticizes Japan's recent changes to its strategy to defend itself.
They attack this actor's credibility or this actor's personality or the speech that this actors delivered. So these are in a diplomatic sense of what they do when they see some countries or Taiwan crossing the red line. And there is another playbook is to use disinformation campaign. And this disinformation campaign is more insidious. For example, they would just forge documents and spread documents on some very obscure platforms or the so-called dark web. And they arranged the spread route to have these documents to be spread onto more well-known social media platforms and to push these documents, these forged documents, to be seen by the public.
In terms of how they target the Japanese, because of this inability to really integrate into the local informational space, they have been trying, especially since the Fukushima treated water release, to target how the others see Japan instead of how the Japanese see Japan. So from, say, 2023 onwards up to around this year, they have been mainly targeting their own audience, say the people who are in China using Chinese social media, but also, for example, South Korea, what they consider the global South and how they perceive Japan.
What particularly concerns me is the spread of disinformation about Japan in Chinese and English environments. Information that indirectly benefits China is spreading, such as claims that Okinawa does not belong to Japan or that the majority of the residents in Okinawa desire independence. Since Japanese internet users rarely provide counter arguments in Chinese or English environments, so this kind of information spreads widely.
The state media started to create stories like saying, well, after Sanae Takaichi made this statement, Japanese citizens were angry and the Chinese citizens canceled their trips to Japan and Japan's economy has been affected, things like that. And those political online commentators started to create more ridiculous stories and trying to depict the prime minister as mistress of America or something like that. So you can see this is a line that they create this message, trying to support this messages with more stories and to strengthen this whole information narratives.
It's not necessarily misogynistic in the language, but it's obvious by how they're targeting her that they do see her as more of a target because she's a woman. But if you look at the online social media narrative, they do use more misogynistic words, like trying to portray how she's interacting with other countries' diplomats as being flirtatious, honey traps, etc. So you have these small videos online on Threads, but also on Instagram. It's trying to say they would cut like a very short segment of maybe her leaning onto a table next to another country's diplomat and saying that, oh, this is honey trapping. This sort of words, you would never say that about a male diplomat.
This attack was mostly initiated by political commentators like Hu Xijin or other, they so-called 大 V, big influencers. So they kind of saying that Takaichi herself is like the mistress of America, and what she have performed in the international stage is inappropriate, and she acted like a mama-san. These commentators also extend these derogatory terms to describe the relationship between Japan and the United States, or even the relationship between Taiwan, Japan, and the United States. And they put it in a context which is very chauvinism and a very demeaning of gender. So I think this is quite ridiculous. They use this kind of attack.
China's influence operations against Japan cannot be said to be very powerful at present. The fact that the Takaichi administration, which China strongly criticized, landslide victory in the election serves as evidence. In Japan, messages that criticize Japan and benefit China are not popular to begin with. So such messages gain power only when the strengths of the ruling and opposition parties are balanced, and opposition supporters actively share them to criticize the administration. However, in Japan, the LDP's power is very strong, and the current Takaichi administration is particularly popular.
Because the goal was to deter them from supporting Takaichi during the February elections, the snap elections. But I feel like in terms of numbers, especially electorally, it had the opposite effect, whereby they actually incentivized more people to vote for Takaichi and the LDP and be more supportive of security initiatives, notwithstanding the kinetic side, but mostly for the hybrid side, where we find that Japanese people are more supportive of the economic security policies.
The Foreign Minister of China issued a statement reacting to the statement made by Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. And after the MFA made this statement, state media and other political influencers started to post messages supporting this statement. And they also created some stories to supplement this official statement. So the official statement is more like decent languages to emphasize that Taiwan is a part of China, and that Japan is trying to reviving their militarism by supporting Taiwan independence.
Fighting all forms of disinformation has been the responsibility of journalists since long ago, not just now. In a democratic society, people act and vote freely based on the information they obtain. The role of journalism is to provide the highly reliable information that people need, and it is our job to point out that incorrect information is wrong. The importance of this has increased more than ever because the speed and influence of the spread of disinformation have significantly increased due to the internet, especially social media. And furthermore, it is being further accelerated by AI-driven deepfakes. The infodemic, where disinformation overflows, has now evolved into an overflow of deepfakes.
So we already know that there will be a wave of disinformation or information manipulation and interference that's coming. So one of them is to map out these times and to figure out when we should keep an eye on it and report on it. A second thing that can be done is, because we already know the playbook, it's more or less the same tactics, it's just it evolves because of the technology available. The tactics themselves, the strategies themselves, more or less remain the same. And there's a lot of reference points between the Russians and the Chinese because they are both major players, malign major players in the field. So you can already anticipate how they're going to frame things, more or less, once you have the issue. So the educational side is very important.
So if we can understand the elements in the playbooks, we can more easily spot the signs. If something is happening or some kind of words are said, some stories are told, you can know maybe they're a part of the playbooks. And I think citizens can also equip themselves with some skills to detecting disinformation campaigns, to identify problematic messages, or even how to identify AI-generated videos or images, right? And they could be part of this playbook. And another important thing is to keep one updated with current events. You know what's going on there, and you know what people are talking about, so that you have more information to help you evaluate the messages. And the most important of all is to stay calm.
We must disseminate scientifically and objectively reliable information. Without this, trust in journalists will decline and people will be even more inclined to believe the disinformation spreading on social media.
It's actually a rather difficult task because nowadays it's not outright factually wrong things that are being put out. These days, instead of disinformation or misinformation, it tends to be malinformation, which basically means that they are partially true or they are factually true, it's just taken out of context. So it's hard to say that, oh, you are wrong, that directly and just delete things. It's just there needs to be context. I would say that China's playbook is working to an extent, not fully quite yet. With Japan, they have been less effective. With Taiwan, they have been quite effective to an extent, especially in regards to cross-strait relations and potential Taiwan contingency and what the Taiwanese government should be doing. Globally, I feel like there has been more awareness, but we also have less resources, especially since last year, to be dealing with this sort of information operations.
In Japan, effectiveness is still limited, but the disinformation in Chinese and English related to Japan is spreading all over the world. So we must strengthen our countermeasures while it is still the effectiveness is still limited in Japan.
I think for domestic Chinese citizens, it works because this match their knowledge framework. But for the Taiwanese citizen, I don't think this really works because we don't really think Japanese or Japanese Prime Minister this way. This doesn't match our framework. So I don't think this campaign really works here in Taiwan.
Thank you for watching this episode of Zoom and Zoom Out. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to like, subscribe, or even leave a comment below. Until next time.